under new measures due to come in from Monday. UK and Irish residents arriving in England from the 33 red list countries will have to pay up to £1,750 to quarantine for 10 days in government-managed hotels or face prosecution or a maximum 10-year prison sentence. The move has sparked anger from senior Tories, the travel industry and critics of draconian COVID restrictions, led by former Supreme Court Judge Lord Sumption, who joins us now. Good afternoon to you. When you were in courtrooms back in the day and dispensing sentences, Lord Sumption, could you ever imagine giving somebody 10 years for something like this?
No, I couldn't. And I don't think that the courts will do it now. I think the courts will be actually very reluctant, except perhaps in the case of repeat offenders, to impose prison sentences at all. But I can't imagine any circumstances in which they would actually impose a sentence of 10 years. I can't believe that the government doesn't realise that. What it is doing is using the criminal law system as a platform for irresponsible rhetoric. And that is something which no government should ever do.
Yeah, agreed. And it does kind of look as if, I can almost see them plucking this figure out of thin air, possibly without even a legal brain in the room when they did it, because you have to kind of think, well, if anybody worth their salt from a legal perspective was around, they would have told them all of this beforehand.
Well, I'm sure that they did take legal advice. I'm sure that they got advice more or less on the lines that I've given. And I'm sure that they said, well, this is an instrument of government propaganda, so we don't need to worry about that. The great object is to influence people.
Yeah.
The trouble is, if you spend your time making irresponsible statements like this, people are going to stop taking you seriously. On many issues, that's already been happening.
Indeed, it was I think you're absolutely spot on. It seems to be, it was the headline they wanted, the 10 years in jail. That's how seriously we take this. But of course, when making policy, and particularly policy that involves the criminal justice system and sentencing and the like, you have to be careful what kind of precedents you set. And also, as I alluded to North Korea at the beginning, Lord Sumption, what kind of country you want to live in as well.
Yes. Well, we should have been asking ourselves that question continuously for the last year. What kind of country do we want to live in? Do we really want to live in a country like China, where the inhabitants are simply passive tools of government policy? Speaking for myself, no, I don't.
The government's answer, I suppose, if Matt Hancock was sitting here, he would say, look, this is very serious. We've got to get control of this pandemic. They are perhaps playing catch up with previous shortfalls. Who knows? But, if we don't have this message going out there, this loud and clear message that if you don't play by the system, that could end up in pandemonium. One or two people could start this whole thing again. So we have to have something that you might call draconian, but as far as they're concerned, it's a very sensible way of warning people of the severity of what they're trying to guard against.
Well, that is a perfectly sensible answer if you believe that the end always justifies the means. Now, that's the motto of every tyrant that ever lived. I don't think that is a sensible principle of government. Everything that government decides has pluses and minuses, and you've got to look at both. You've got to look at the proportionality of the whole thing. You've got to look at the untoward consequences as well as the benefits as you see them. And the problem about so much of current government policy is that it only looks at the benefits that they see coming from these restrictions. It doesn't look at the staggering human, economic, and indeed educational cost. And that is actually a very serious state of affairs. You've got to look at every aspect of the problem and not just at the health aspects.
It's a multifaceted debate and discussion. You're absolutely right. And just to go back to where you started on this, you don't imagine many judges imposing a sentence like this. You speak for yourself, of course, but is your legal instinct, that few judges would depart from the view you have on this? Do you think many people in that world would support Matt Hancock?
It's not a question of supporting Matt Hancock. Every sentencing judge has to look at the particular circumstances of the case before him. And it's very difficult to imagine what all of those circumstances might be in advance. But the fact is that judges, unlike ministers, seek to achieve some sense of proportionality, some sense of balance with other offences, and some sense of that the punishment is being made to fit the gravity of the crime. And I cannot imagine any circumstances, frankly, in which a 10-year sentence would be imposed. I can imagine circumstances in which a shorter sentence of imprisonment might be imposed for a deliberate repeat offence. But otherwise, I think that the courts are going to be pretty reluctant to impose sentences of imprisonment at all.
Lord Sumption, thank you. It's always good to get your perspective on this, your own perspective, your legal perspective. Lord Sumption, of course, is a former Supreme Court Justice, right at the top of his field throughout his years, dispensing, sentencing and presiding over cases of all manner of types and backgrounds and decisions that most of us look at and think, wow, I wouldn't want to be the person sitting on the bench having to deal with that. He's your man that did it for many, many years. And there he is saying that Matt Hancock or the government's 10 years in jail on this one for coming back and not, well, you could have done your paperwork all wrong. 10 years in the chiller? Really? Kim Jong-un would be blushing at this, wouldn't he?